Look how Italy did. There, video done.
En la historia militar, esta España singular, siempre se encuentra un soldado.
Spain hasn't really been considered a major player in international politics ever since the Napoleonic Wars, and has been in decline ever since the rule of Charles V. During the 20th century, Spain has suffered regime change from regime change. The kingdom, which had been ruled since the beginnings of Spain, became consumed by rising dictatorial prime ministers, causing the creation of the Second Spanish Republic, which failed to remain stable. By 1936, Spain was in severe collapse and decline under a divided republic. The election of 1936 led to the Popular Front, a coalition of socialist groups, winning the election. This led to a military coup as the military led by Francisco Franco seized Spanish Africa and started the Spanish Civil War. The military group, now calling themselves the Nationalists, quickly took advantage of the division of the Republicans to seize most of the country. The Republican side was crushed on April 1st, 1939, as Franco declared a one-party fascist state led by the Nationalists. Franco is known as a fascist, but he didn't entirely fit into this category, as he didn't police people's thoughts. Some criticism was allowed, and people were allowed to leave Spain. When World War II started, Spain was wary about joining that war. Though Spain had ideological sympathies with the Axis powers who had funded the nationalists during the Civil War, Spain was still devastated by the Civil War, so chose not to join the war and isolated Spain in the post-war world. So let's imagine in an alternate timeline that Spain joined the Axis powers during World War II and declared war on the Allies. Spain joining World War II would number the days of the Franco regime, though for a while it would not seem that way. It all depends on when Spain would join and how. Let's say that Spain's desire for Gibraltar and Portugal are enough of a reason for Franco, and Spain joins the war during the fall of France. Spain would face an uphill battle during the war as Spain was destroyed by the Civil War. Franco could see that Spain was not ready to join World War II because the potential gains couldn't outweigh the problems of joining a major European war. But let's imagine that those problems just aren't considered by Franco, and Spain joins the Axis powers. Spain would use the collapse of France to take Morocco and parts of southern France. Spain's African territories would be protected by Vichy France from invasion due to the buffer that would be French West Africa. Spain wouldn't be able to take more territory than the bare minimum. Spain could even try having a Greece of their own and invade Portugal. This would be a disaster for Spain's German ally, as Portugal would become another diversion of German troops away from their main offensives, like the invasion of the Soviet Union. Spain would spend the entire war under immense strain with their broken economy. Spain would suffer through failed invasion upon failed invasion. The Allies would push through Morocco and invade Spain from the south as the Spanish war effort begins to collapse as resistance groups rise up against Franco. The Spanish Liberation Front, which are remnants of the Popular Front, seized Barcelona, and the Royal Guard, led by the exiled Infante Jaime I, who was the eldest successor to Alfonso XIII. Francisco Franco began to lose control not just of Spain, but of his own power, something that was a particular concern to Adolf Hitler. After seeing how Italy devolved into a quagmire, he began to worry that the same would happen in Spain, so Hitler marched an invasion force on the border of France and occupied Spain as the resistance groups fought the invading Nazis as both groups began to reach towards Madrid. Francisco Franco knew the gig was up and tried to flee to Switzerland, but his plane was shot down by an Allied fighter jet. His death signified the final death of the short-lived Spanish state. But now a new war was brewing in this newly liberated Spain as the Second Spanish Civil War began. With the fascists gone in Spain, two factions now battle over the fate of Spain throughout the 20th century. I want to imagine how Spain would end up if the monarchists won the war and if the communists won the war. First, the monarchists. It's 1949 and the communists have been wiped out by the Royal Guard as Infante was crowned King Infante I. The Westback Kingdom would join the Western Bloc as the Soviets consolidated its control of Eastern Europe. Spain would become a founding member of NATO along with the other nations of Western Europe. Though a mass execution of enemies of the king would be carried out after the monarchist victory, suspected fascists and communists are killed in a mass purge to root out opposition. After the bloody reconstruction of the late 40s, Spain would enter into the 50s as a stable kingdom who continues to repress the constant threat of the former Spanish Liberation Front and Spanish state. After a golden age during the 50s, Infante was assassinated by a former Francoist officer. A public battle between the heirs to the Spanish throne, which led to Alfonso XIV rising to power, only destabilized Spain further as the underground National Spanish Party and the Communist Party rose in popularity. Spain was on the brink of another civil war, with the Soviet funding only making it worse. On April 19, 1968, protests began in Barcelona and Madrid, calling for the abdication of Alfonso as the protests became violent as the fascist and communist factions fought each other. Alfonso XIV abdicated the throne and the Third Spanish Republic was declared, with an election causing the communist and fascist parties to divide the fragile republic. The communist president and the fascist prime minister had a public falling out as the prime minister declared the restoration of the Spanish state and the president declared the Spanish People's Republic as the Third Spanish Civil War began. The West backed the fascist and the Soviets backed the communist as another Cold War proxy war began. The fascists pushed through the north to capture Madrid and Barcelona as the communists held positions in the cities with forces on the French border to stop aid from the west reaching the fascists. The fascists, now calling themselves the National Spanish Front, encircled Madrid and besieged Barcelona. Soviet aid to the Spanish communists began to dry up as Turkey and Denmark closed off their territorial waters to the Soviet ships. The communist lines began to break as they were surrounded by enemies as a failed counterattack led to the fall of Barcelona, with the fascist aid line secured. Despite the failure of the communist war effort, Madrid continued to be a thorn in the fascist side. Madrid faced bombings and fierce fighting throughout the city. The communists held out as they waited desperately for someone to break the encirclement. On May 3, 1971, Madrid fell to the fascists as the communists divided into different ideological factions, with the Soviet Union completely shutting off aid. The fascists had returned to power in Spain as the Spanish state continued to rule over Spain. Maybe it would become a kingdom again, like our timeline, or a republic, or maybe it would even stay fascist. But let's imagine if the communists won the Civil War. The communists defeated the Monarchist, with the Royal Guard losing hope after the fall of Madrid and the death of Infante Jaime I, as the Spanish People's Republic was declared. This would terrify the United States and the West, not only that a communist nation existed in Western Europe, but that it also had influence over Latin America, aka America's backyard. Spain would be placed under mass sanctions as it would be trapped by a hostile France, Portugal, and Morocco. Spain would remain isolated and poor throughout the Cold War, with aid from the Soviets keeping it afloat barely. That is, until the collapse of the Soviet Union and revolutions across the Eastern Bloc. This would not be lost on the Spanish, as the recession since the 70s soured popularity with the government. On June 17, 1992, protests began in Madrid, Barcelona, and across the Basque Country. The police fired on the protesters as the protest only became larger and more united, with the Spanish militia forming to resist the government. The Communist Party resigned out of disgrace as a show trial was put on as high-ranking members, including the former president, who was shot in the center of Madrid. Spain had now entered the post-Cold War world, and they now had to choose what they would be in it. The election of 1993 would decide the future of Spain as 5 parties ran for control: the Communist Party, Republican Party, Labour Party, Royal Party, and National Party. The election was fierce, but the Republican Party won, with the Royal Party coming in second. The Third Spanish Republic was declared as Spain became a relatively conservative republic similar to the United States. If Spain joined the Axis, it would only end the Francoist regime earlier. It could go down any path. No one can truly know what would happen if Spain joined the war. What do you think would happen? I'll see you guys next time with another scenario.